Making room grew out of a very simple idea, which was when Mayor Bloomberg first issued Plan YC. It began with a premise that our population was growing and that we were going to be adding 1 million people by the year 2030. So we began to ask ourselves, well, how would 1 million more people actually fit into our housing stock? So that led us to ask ourselves, well, how are people fitting into the housing stock today?
Well, New York has a very diverse and extraordinary housing stock. In recent years, the housing stock hasn't kept pace with changes in the demographic makeup of the city.
Right now, the city of New York is largely dictating choice for people.
Essentially, we're still asking the development community to produce the same exact housing type that we asked them to produce after World War II, which is on average a 2-bedroom apartment that was going to be suitable for the nuclear family, the mom, the dad, and 2 kids.
The neighborhoods that we live in, the housing stock doesn't accommodate the population. I mean, New York City's growth has been much more than we expected, and particularly neighborhoods in the outer boroughs like Queens were not set up for it. The infrastructure is not there.
Housing policies really grew out of the social reformers. At the turn of the early 20th century, we transformed the way that housing policies were used to really eradicate terrible overcrowding, and the conditions were incredibly unsanitary and bad for people's health.
Over the years, a lot of housing reform that has substantially improved the quality of housing in New York. Required fire escapes or ventilation in all of the rooms in an apartment, or minimum room sizes.
There was also this real sense that good housing would transform people into good people and into good Americans. And you would do that by giving them as much space as was possible for a family, and this really very much informed the early public housing movement. It then moves on to begin to identify kinds of housing beyond just the old tenement slum housing that really needed to be eradicated in the world of these reformers. We had a whole range of housing types, from lodging houses and SROs to boarding houses, and even buildings that had certificates of occupancy as bachelor apartments. And all these different kind of flexible units began to get swept away in this desire to transform both the housing stock and the people who lived in it to be good Americans, to form a nuclear family, and to enter this new middle-class life.
Over time, as those regulations and standards have built up, the choices that existed in the marketplace before have been wiped away from the market, or they've gone underground.
You see the expression of that underground black market in everything from Craigslist ads for apartment shares to the problems of fires of buildings where there's illegal occupancy and people are dying, and our firemen are putting themselves at risk going into buildings where they don't know what kind of partition walls they're going to be facing.
People end up creating spaces to accommodate their needs, right? So we see a lot of informal housing, single or 2-family homes that are divided up, basement apartments. The attics are used as apartments as well, so from the attic to the basement, the single or 2-family home is full, and they're sharing kitchens and bathrooms.
Many people don't realize this, but according to code in New York, it's illegal for 3 or more unrelated adults to live together in one dwelling unit.
Why can't someone provide housing where more than 3 seniors could actually, live together in a shared environment and be able to socialize with one another, and maybe have some amenities there that really address the needs of seniors?
People who live in joint family situations, really the rental market has nothing for them.
People are staying single longer, people are forming other kinds of households, and there's all kinds of ways that people are living together now, and they have to kind of fit themselves into the housing stock rather than have the housing stock fit itself to meet their needs.
People aren't living in the squalor the way that they once did in New York, and I think we just need flexibility to let people make their own choices.
I think making the rules more flexible and more based around safety versus the old codes that have been around for ages that don't necessarily look at current populations.
Today, it's really a different world. We have a different view of consuming environmental resources. The greenest thing any person can do is to live in a smaller space or live in a shared space and use mass transit to get to work. And that really should be where New York City is setting the bar very high and creating the most innovative housing models in the world. That's not happening right now.
It's a whole range of New Yorkers who are not being served by the market as it exists now. It's not just the recent college graduate coming to the city who really wants to live with 6 of his or her friends. It's not just the immigrant family living in a basement apartment. For the Making Room Design study, we've asked 4 architects to work with us to propose a variety of new types of units and ways in which those units can fit into buildings. The whole project is really about increasing the choices available to New Yorkers, recognizing who lives in the city now and what they need or want in their housing, and how our regulatory structure and the designs that architects and developers are able to offer to the market can respond better to who New Yorkers are now.
Making room is really a way to harness the creative energy that's here in New York and to let it loose on some new housing prototypes that we will have teams of architects designing, which we will then put out for very careful and detailed critique and figure out all of the regulations, codes, and laws that would prevent these models from actually being built. We will then try to move towards identifying what really needs to change in that regulatory framework so that we can actually allow our development community to be let loose and create new ways for people to live and provide a lot more choice in the housing market.